Our next speaker is Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison has a PhD from entomology from North Carolina State University, MA in entomology from Kansas University, a BS in science and agriculture and wildlife sciences from North Carolina State College, is a taxonomist and public health entomologist with 52 years of field, laboratory, and educational working experience on mosquitoes and ticks, and I've worked with Dr. Harrison years ago on mosquito-borne illnesses myself. Prevention and control of arthropod diseases, and has published 122 peer-reviewed books and papers. He served for over 23 years and 11 months in the U.S. Army, conducting research in 16 countries. Dr. Harrison is affiliate professor at Western Carolina University and a visiting scientist at Catawba College in North Carolina with no plans for full retirement. He lives in Clemens. He's married to Carol for 57 years, 3 sons, 11 grandchildren, 8 of which currently live in North Carolina and 5 in Chatham County. So thank you, Dr. Harrison.
Okay, I need to change this. So, yeah. No, this. Okay. I'll let you change that. There we go. Yeah, great.
We can use this, or we can use this.
Yeah, I've got that. So, does this pointer work?
Yes, sir.
I've got one here that works.
You're going to have to
Hey,
speak into that.
If any of you are interested in a good pointer, I don't know whether you are or not, you can get them at the pet shop. These are made for getting cats to chase them, okay? And they're really neat, so they're real cheap, so. I'm Bruce Harrison, and he's already given me an introduction, and I appreciate being here, and it's been a long time since I've been here and done anything official on ticks. But anyway, I was listening to Carl's definition of surveillance, and it occurred to me that being an entomologist and being in the field means our surveillance means wading through and collecting ticks, okay? So with that, I'll get started. So. Just the life cycle, you're all familiar with that, but I just wanted to point out to you that these are eggs from a big female that was originally like that, and there will be probably 10 to 12,000 eggs there, and that little critter right up there is the larva, which is about the same size as an egg, okay, and that's what comes out in July and August in this area in patches. You walk through and you get a patch of 2,000 of those on your legs. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I keep my time frame here. Now there are 5 important Piedmont ticks, and the first one is Amblyomma americanum, and I'm going to call it AA after this probably. The Lone Star tick, and you're all familiar with that. And I'll let you read that. You can see that it's extremely common, as you well know, and it's spreading north and west. Amblyomma maculatum, AM, is a Gulf Coast tick, and in the past we first encountered this tick in 1983 in the southeastern part of the state, and since then now it's moving west also, and we've gotten it clearly into the Latta Plantation area over north of Charlotte, and it's moving further west. Dermacentor variabilis, the American dog tick, you only see the adults on people, and previously it was very common, now it's uncommon, possibly due to the topical treatments that people put on their dogs. So eye scaps, Exodes scapularis, black-legged tick, usually only adults on people in North Carolina, and the nymphs are uncommon on people in the south, but it's statewide. And actually, historically, the first I. scapularis was collected in 1897 in Wilmington that we know of, so that's the first record in the state. So, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Am I too? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Rhiphocephalus sanguineus is something that you don't see very much anymore because people keep their dogs better now than they used to. But this is the brown dog tick, and it's common on dogs. And the larvae and the nymphs will bite people, and they're widespread but less common now since the topical treatments again on dogs, and that people take better care of their dogs. Okay, humans are incidental hosts for these critters. Ticks have evolved along with and are primarily parasites of various wildlife, reptile, bird, mammal host species. And we've just gone through the tick stages. Reproduction is internal fertilization and oviposition of embryonated eggs. Why are ticks efficient vectors? They're very ancient organisms, hence countless exposures of potential parasites and pathogens. They have encountered those. They have high survival value in the struggle for existence, and I'll give you a couple examples. There are soft ticks. We have those in the western part of the United States, but in Africa they're very common, and they cause a lot of tick-borne diseases. And they live in the soil, in the sandy soil. And one French professor put one in a jar, put a cork over the jar, and 26 years later it was still alive. Okay, and another example of our favorite, Lone Star ticks, is I was in a meeting in Newport News in last February, and was fortunate to be able to judge 8 posters by students, and one of the posters was on the survival of ticks when they're inundated in water, totally inundated in water. And guess what? Amblyomma maculatum survived 3 weeks, totally submerged, and our favorite, the Lone Star, survived 6 weeks when totally immersed. So that's how they have a high survival value. Each stage feeds on different hosts or on the same host depending on the tick species. They feed on a variety of wildlife. They feed for long periods of time, large volumes of blood, and often the pathogens are vertically transmitted from the mother to the next generation by transovarial transmission, which can survive the molts through the stages in the next generation. So this is a machine. It's just cranking out pathogens, okay? Okay, the Lone Star, which is here, and that's the female with a white spot in the center, and you've all seen that. That is the most abundant species in the southeastern U.S. This is a picture of the female, the male on the right, and the nymph up in the top left. And that's a sesame seed to give you an estimate of the size. I don't know how many of you know sesame seeds. How many of you know? Okay, a few of you do. This is extremely common. This is Chatham's problem species. Believe me. The importance, ehrlichiosis and Ewingi, STARI, Rickettsia Amblyomatis, Parkeri, and 3 new undescribed spotted fever species, heartland virus, alpha-gal, and tick paralysis. Is that enough? Okay. Well, there's going to be even more. I'll show you in just a few minutes. So that's all. That tick can transmit all of those things. Okay, alpha-gal, and this is the question that you ask about the lady right there. It was discovered in the U.S. in 2007. It's now recognized worldwide, normally caused by Lone Star ticks here in the U.S., but caused by many other tick species in other countries. It is a sugar in red meat and ticks, but not in humans. That's the key, okay? Normally humans can eat red meat without a problem. However, if alpha-gal gets into a person's blood system during a tick bite, the body produces antibodies to fight the sugar. Depending on the person, the responses range from no response, in my case, okay, because I've been bitten by thousands of Lone Stars, or it can lead to anaphylactic shock and death. And I put the EpiPen out there because of the price of EpiPens, okay? So people carrying them around. Anyway, last week I taught a course in Suffolk, Virginia, and I had a student, about 35 years old, that had alpha-gal. And we would go out and eat, and he'd say, no, I can't eat that. I can't eat beef. I can't eat pork. I have to eat something else. And he said that his reaction is delayed by about 4 or 5 hours before he reacts to it. But some reactions are as long as 8 hours. Some people have recovered from this and are no longer affected, but other people don't recover. So we don't understand that. And I wanted to ask how many of you think those are chiggers or Lone Stars? Well, you know how to tell the difference? You'll never find a chigger mite on your bite. The little chigger mite is a larva of another mite, okay? And it will never be found at the site of the bite. It's gone already by the time the bite appears. But you will find, if it's Lone Star ticks, you will find a tiny seed tick attached to you. So there are many people think they are in chiggers when they actually have seed ticks on them. So okay, this is Dermacentor variabilis, the American dog tick. And again, you can see that little tiny larval stage right in between the nymph and the sesame seed. On the right is a male and on the left is the female, and they have different color patterns. It's statewide, and I guess it's been here forever. And it transmits spotted fevers, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, R. rickettsii, and R. amblyommatis, tularemia, ehrlichiosis, and tick paralysis. It's been involved. And tick paralysis is when a tick gets on you and takes a good blood meal and has been there for 3 or 4 days, and there are neurotoxins in there that start affecting the body, and the person starts at the bottom of the body and comes up the body like this, and when it reaches the lungs, you're dead, okay, because the muscles stop working. But all you have to do is take the tick off, and within 24 hours, you're totally recovered. This is it used to be particularly common in young girls, where the ticks would get up in here behind the head here, and you can't see it in the hair. But it's very rare now. So this is Ixodes scapularis, the Lyme disease tick. The black-legged tick is the official common name, and it is in North Carolina, primarily in the coastal plain, and the Piedmont counties. But it is now, as Carl mentioned, it is now in the mountains coming down from the north. It's a transmitter of Lyme and Lyme-like Borrelia pathogens and anaplasmosis and Powassan virus. Okay, just so you understand that just identifying a black-legged tick is not easy, there are 8 different species here that have black legs that look the same, okay? So these have to be examined under a microscope. You just can't pick them up and look at them and make sure that you've got a Lyme disease tick. And you can see that, for instance, if you look down at Scapularis, down near the bottom, it's been found on 41 different mammal species, 57 birds species, 11 reptile species. The red humans means it's been found attached to humans. All of those species have been found attached to humans. So you can see our wildlife has a variety of black-legged ticks. And one thing I wanted to tell you, the black-legged tick is not new to North Carolina. As I said, it was found in Wilmington in 1897. But even during the 30s, when there were no deer, practically no deer in North Carolina, or turkeys in North Carolina, there were Scapularis on the raccoons and the foxes and things like that. So the black-legged tick bites in our area transmit Lyme disease pathogens less frequently. Transmission is much higher in the Northeast and upper Midwest, as Carl mentioned just a few minutes ago. For Lyme disease and EM or erythema migrans can cause, but not always, a bullseye rash around the site of the tick bite in the center. And in STARI, the rash usually spreads randomly. And when I first started learning about ticks back in the 60s, I took an epidemiology course at CDC, and we were taught that spotted fever group pathogens, particularly Rocky Mountain spotted fever, a rash typically starts distally on the hands and on the arms and on the feet and even on the soles and the palms of your hands, which is very uncommon for rashes. And then it spreads to the trunk of the body. I don't know whether that's still used or not in diagnosis, Carl, do you?
I think you have a rash, subsequent to recognized tick bite, that would be considered. Because the EM rash may or may not look like that in the picture. It could be much more blotchy, it could be in other parts of the body.
Right.
It could be multiple organs.
He's saying it could be much more blotchy. It could be a rash over the whole body or parts of the body. It's variable, is what you're saying. So, yeah. Thank you, Carl. Okay, now, recent diagnostic change in CDC and new problems caused by the discovery of new pathogens. And this may be a mistake on my part, but I thought last year, Carl, that CDC no longer recommends using an erythema migrans EM as a method for diagnosing Lyme disease. Is that correct?
So the EM rash in a high incidence state will by itself be a confirmed case.
In a high incidence state, the EM rash is alone enough to confirm the case, okay?
But I think, that creates a problem then for states like Virginia where they have their high incidence for Lyme, they have the Lone Star tick, so there's going to be some trouble in misclassification between
Right.
STARI and Lyme.
Right, okay. I think the problem I've got with this, if the EM is not used, this really impacts us in a low incidence state because I'm asking, will the MDs even ask about tick bites?
Well, I don't know if they'll ask about tick bites, but they're certainly ordering a lot of tests.
Okay,
So they're clearly testing Lyme disease.
okay, thank you.
We know that.
The other thing that's recent is the new pathogens that are being discovered at an alarming rate in our ticks, particularly the Lone Star state and tick, and I mentioned that just a moment ago. Now, this is a slide from Charlie Apperson, Dr. Apperson at North Carolina State, who has worked on ticks since the 1980s. And these are some of the natural host of ticks in Chatham County. And the American dog tick is up top row. On the left, you see the larvae, and the nymphs are on voles and white-footed mice and other small rodents, whereas the adults are on raccoons, dogs, but not on deer. You can't get DVs off of deer. If you look at Lone Stars, down in the middle, they're on birds, and I'd like to say that we talk about deer a lot with Lone Stars and how infested they can be. In fact, fawns can die from thousands of Lone Stars when they're first born. But turkeys, wild turkeys, are major birds that carry the larvae and the nymphs of the Lone Star. So we've got two game animals. We've got hunters out looking for these birds and deer, and they're really during the spring, particularly. I guess this turkey season is over now, Ken? Not quite, okay. But so we've still got people out there sitting out there letting the Lone Stars feed on them, okay? So anyway, Lone Stars, larvae, nymphs, and adults can get on anything they want to. They get on anything, and they can stay. Everything can be on a deer, or it can be, one stage can be on a mouse, and the next on a raccoon, and the next one on a deer. So they're very variable in the way they feed. The black-legged tick, eye scaps, it feeds, the larvae and nymphs feed on reptiles like lizards and glass snakes or glass lizards, and birds again, and white-footed mouse again, and other mice. And then the adults are on dogs and deer. Okay, in northeastern USA, the immatures of eye scaps feed on white-footed mice. They don't have reptiles, many reptiles in the northeast, okay, and up north. So there's a limitation on what the larvae and the nymphs are going to feed on, and they're feeding on rodents, and there are high densities of the white-footed mice. So in places like Westchester County, north of New York City, 45 nymphs are infected with Lyme disease that come off of the deer, the mice and whatnot. What is happening along our coast where this mouse does not occur? And I would like to show you that white area. It doesn't quite show up completely here, but there's a white area on that map right here from the Pamlico south where the white-footed mouse doesn't occur. Yet there are Lyme cases there, okay? So what's happening? What's giving them Lyme disease in that area? And that's my question. Because, and also Apperson and workers at North Carolina State discovered that the Lyme tick, Ixodes scapularis, along the coast in the coastal counties feeds primarily on reptiles, the larvae and the nymphs. They don't feed on white-footed. And Borrelia burgdorferi won't develop in the reptiles. So. Okay, these are some of the reptiles that they found that were heavily infested with the larvae and the nymphs of Borrelia scapularis. And they're quite common down at the coast in sandy soil and whatnot. Okay, I did a little table here, and just ignore those deers per square miles over on the right, because Ken Knight here is going to give us a talk here shortly, and he's going to show you the distribution of that now. So ignore those figures because it's probably not the same as what I've got. But I tried to determine how many reptile species there were in certain sites from the north to the south, from Edenton up in the north and down to, let's see what we've got here, down to Wilmington and some of the Fayetteville, and some of the other, and Charlotte, so where you've got high numbers of reptile species. Whereas you get over into the rodent species, and in the north you're starting to pick up more voles and whatnot, and in Asheville you're picking up more voles and even some lemmings up there. So you're getting higher rodent numbers in the north part of the state and in the western part of the state in the high elevations, whereas the reptile numbers are dropping off in the west. So this may account, there are high numbers of not only the white-footed mouse, but the deer mouse in the mountains, which look almost identical. In fact, they have to actually examine the skeletons to correctly identify them. So I think that our numbers of rodents in the mountains and the lack of reptiles is why the ticks, which are a northern strain that are used to feeding on rodents and the white-footed mice, are coming down through the mountain chains. They're coming to the west where they've got more food, and they're not adapting to feeding on reptiles. So anyway, it's complicated. So we've got two pictures. We've got one thing on the coast, and we've got another one up in the mountains. Stephen, are you going to talk about this? A little bit. Okay, I'm sorry if I stepped on you. Anyway, Gulf Coast tick. Ambioma maculatum looks almost like the American dog tick, but it's not. It's got very long palpi that's sticking out in front, those pair of things sticking out in between the legs in front. And boy, when they bite, they hurt. They hurt. You know they're biting you, okay? They're not like the other ticks. So apparently, and it throbs. And I get bit. I even swell up a little bit under my arms when I get bit by them. So anyway, they transmit Rickettsia parkeri, as Carl mentioned. And that has been found in North Carolina in 29% of these ticks. So you've got almost a third of a chance, 1 out of every 3 tick, basically, of being bitten by an infected maculatum. So, okay, this is the brown dog tick, and it reproduces in dog houses and inside your homes on couches and chairs, okay? If you've got a dog that comes in the house. And back in the 90s, we found quite a few children that had larvae and nymphs of this tick attached to them. So there are specimens here in North Carolina that can transmit transmit Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and there's a Rickettsia macilii that's quite not as dangerous as Rickettsia, and then ehrlichiosis and Ewing eye are transmitted by this tick. So anyway, it's now not very common, this tick, because of the spot technique on dogs. So, and this was taken from the Four Corners when there was a Rocky Mountain spotted fever outbreak in the Four Corners, and it was caused by this tick. And that dog is famous now because it showed up in a number of talks. So, but that's what happens when your dog goes in a house infested. You can take the lid off of a dog house, and the entire lid of the dog house will be covered inside with these ticks. I'm sorry. I don't know what that is, so I can't step away from this thing, okay? Okay, now I was asked to give a historical background, and this is a little wordy, okay? And I tried to make it easy to read, but I found it's a little more complicated than I thought it was going to be, and a little longer than I thought it was going to be. So I want to go through this and give you a background on the tick work in North Carolina. Basically, records of tick studies in North Carolina are rare prior to the 1980s. And as far as I know, before 1980s, there was no entomologist in the state that actually worked on a tick, specifically on ticks. They may have gone out and tried to control ticks, but they weren't tick experts, okay? So this started in the 1980s when Dr. Apperson at North Carolina State and Dr. Levin and Dr. Levine studied Lyme disease ticks up in northeastern North Carolina, and they had several publications. Then in 1980, Dr. Nolan Newton started public health pest management, Nolan was my boss, and I was in public health pest management when we got canned in 2011. So anyway, and he initiated responses to North Carolina tick complaints. Slaff and Apperson, who also worked in public health pest management, Slaff did, they studied the attachment sites of Dermacentor variabilis, which were very common back in the 90s here in North Carolina. And they discovered an interesting thing, that even though they might get 22% of the ticks attached on the legs of people, 50% were up around the head. And they found that this tick likes to migrate up to the head. And so they're quite common. When I used to find them in my hair and whatnot after coming in from the field, and I had to take them off. So, and then in '93 I arrived in public health pest management, and I started limited tick work in 47 counties. Our team of public health management was broken into 3 areas. I had the western 47 counties, and then there was a middle Piedmont and eastern coastal plain, and then there was the coastal plain, and there were 3 different people responsible for those 3 areas. So anyway, I made site visits to tick complaints, so I got to see plenty of ticks, but mostly here in the Piedmont. Then Kirkland et al. Studied tick bite rashes and ticks collected at the Wayward Girls Camp near Bear Creek here in Chatham County. And during that study, one girl died of ehrlichiosis, and this was published in 1997. And I'm going to highlight Kirkland, Apperson, the next one, Smith, and Public Health Pest Management, and another paper, Lee et al., that has just published in 2014. I'm going to highlight them a little more and give you a little more information about them later, but right now I'm just going through the sequence and the years that were involved here. In 2006, Apperson and students initiated a tick project in Chatham County, and that was published in 2008. And by the way, I've given copies of these papers to Ann, so that if anybody wants a copy or something, they can see them. In 2006, one of Apperson's graduate students, Smith, he started a second tick project in Chatham County, and that was published. He got his PhD out of that publication. That was published in 2010. And then PHPM, Public Health Pest Management, started its tick-wide tick project in 2008, but we closed in 2011 before the ongoing studies were completed. And collections were made in Chatham, so. And I'll give you more information on that in just a minute. Now, to get more specific, here's the Kirkland study. There were 14 patients, girls with erythema migrans. 94% of 343 ticks on 34 of the 65 residents were Lone Stars. 6% were American dog ticks. 588 ticks collected on vegetation, and AA was 97%, DVs were 2%, and there were 2 ice capped nymphs. There were no Lyme, Borrelia burgdorferi, spirochetes were isolated from skin biopsies, and since the serological test did not reveal B. burgdorferi and no spirochetes were found in skin biopsies, this suggested to the team the presence of a yet unidentified agent transmitted in Lone Star ticks. This is the beginning of our accrual of knowledge, okay, about what's happening in Chatham. And that's what I wanted to emphasize. Apperson et al. In 2008, they started to study because of rare tick isolates in rickettsia in DVs did not support the huge number of human cases of Rocky Mountain spotted fever being diagnosed in North Carolina. They sampled 32 homes across Chatham County in 2005. Lone Star ticks were 99.6% of the 6,500 some odd ticks collected. American dog ticks were less than 1%. You can see how from 90s to 2005 and 6, the DVs were plummeting. They were getting very uncommon. 44%, 11 pools out of 25 pools of AA ticks were infected with a new rickettsia species, which is now named Rickettsia amblyommatis, belonging to the spotted fever group. 3 of 6 human patients classified as probable Rocky Mountain spotted fever cases demonstrated a 4-fold or greater IgG antibody titer to Rickettsia amblyommatis, but not to Rickettsia rickettsii. The conclusions they drew: high numbers of diagnosed Rocky Mountain spotted fever human cases in North Carolina could be caused by R. amblyommatis rather than Rickettsia rickettsii. Now, amblyommatis causes a mild type disease compared to Rocky Mountain spotted fever. This has since come to be true, okay? It's published in several states now where they've documented more human cases. So Apperson was correct in his suggestion here. Smith et al., who worked as Apperson's student, initiated his study in 2006, and he sampled 26 peri-residential, in other words, around a residential site, in 1 year. He collected 3,700 ticks, and 98.5% of them were AAs. There was 1% DVs, and ISCAPs was 0.05%, a half a percent. The tick infestations or infections involving 1,590 AAs, 36 DVs, and the 15 ISCAP nymphs were tested for pathogens. The AAs had 56.4% had Rickettsia amblyommatis, which is causing a mild-like Rocky Mountain spotted fever case or spotted fever case. 1.8% Ehrlichia chaffiensis, and 0.4% Borrelia lone stari, which causes STARI. The DVs, 19.4%, were positive for Rocky Mountain spotted for Rickettsia montanensis, which has now been found to cause another mild type Lyme disease. Okay, and 11.1% Rickettsia amblyommatis, and 13.9% of an unidentified Rickettsia species. Then the Ixodes scapularis, 40% of them had Borrelia burgdorferi sensulato, which means in the broad sense. We used to have only one species, Borrelia burgdorferi, and it caused Lyme disease. Now we've got 20 species in the Borrelia burgdorferi group, and a number of them cause Lyme-like disease. So, conclusions: the greatest risk to people in Chatham is from the spotted fever group Rickettsia. Also, undiagnosed febrile illnesses associated with tick bites could be due to new emerging rickettsial pathogens. Okay. Now, this study was not done specifically in Chatham, although there were specimens collected in Chatham, but this involved about 27 counties, I think, in the state. It focused on Amblyomma maculatum, which is the new tick that's here, and Rickettsia parkeri, another spotted fever group. The study was conducted in 2009 and 2010 in 27 North Carolina counties, including Chatham. 234 maculatum. They're not easy to find, okay? They're hotspots. They're in hotspots, and you can collect in 1, 2, or 3, or 4 areas and not find anything.
Excuse me, would you try speaking into that microphone? I think you're saying some things I really want to know about without causing an echo, but I can't hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. I thought I was speaking into it, but here we go. How about that? Is that better? I'm sorry. I thought I was doing okay here, so thank you. So 29%, 68 of 234 ticks were found infected with parkeri. And also 9 ticks were found infected with an undescribed species currently called Candidatus R. andini. No ticks, 3 collected from Chatham, were positive for Rickettsia in that study. But Wake County was heavily infested with parkeri. 40-some-odd% of the ticks in Wake had parkeri. So parkeri is out there. Several other counties had high numbers of parkeri infected ticks. Conclusions: some human cases of spotted fever group in North Carolina are likely being caused by our parkeri infections after A. maculatum bites. We're still gaining speed here. We're still building energy. Okay, now PHPM. We collected 31,000 total specimens between 2008 and 2011. 24 4,800 and some odd were the Lone Star ticks, or 80%. We got over 1,000 DVs for 3.4%, 3,100 some odd eye scapularis, 10%. We specialized, we were really looking hard for eye scaps, and we found them down along the coastal counties. Then we discovered another tick that we didn't know was in the state, Ixodes affinis, and we got 853 of that. And it is heavily infected with Borrelia burgdorferi, and it occurs along the coast in that white area that I was talking about, but it doesn't bite humans, okay? But it maintains the Borrelia burgdorferi cycle in the rodents, in the marsh rice rats, and the cotton rats, and things like that that are down along the coast. And then there were 1,200 or so other species, specimens that belong to other species for 3.9%. This is the status of our tick collections in January of 2010. So you're going to see a lot of blank spots out on the west side because this is only between 2008 and 2010. But you can see already that according to the, if you look down on the bottom right, at the very bottom dark brown, Chatham had the highest number of specimens collected there, of all specimens. Then over to the left, you can see the breakdown of, and 78% of the specimens collected in our collections were Lone Stars, and black-leggeds were 11%, and American dogs 3%, and the others. We tested I. Scapularis, 383 specimens. We got 1 or 3 positive Borrelia burgdorferi SS, sensu stricto, the Lyme disease pathogen, okay? Less than 1% of 383 specimens. We also got a new record for the state, Borrelia miyamotoi, which is a relapsing fever. It causes relapsing fever in humans. So that shows you that the eye scaps are not very heavily infected in the areas that we collected. This is a new map that was published in 2015 of eye scaps distribution in North Carolina. And if you'll notice over on the left, you probably can't read it, but in Dennis in 1990 and all in 1998 had only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 counties in the state marked as established for I. scapularis. Our data that we collected in PHPM allowed us to build up that so that we now know in the right map that eye scaps is much more extensively established in the state. Then here is data going all the way back for 11 years ago, but just to show you Rocky Mountain spotted fever surveillance that we did. And it shows you that Wake County was heavily infested with human cases, had many human cases there, the highest number, whereas Chatham did not have that many cases. Then ehrlichiosis, the monocytic ehrlichiosis, again, Wake, and down in 2005, Chatham was as heavily had as many cases as Wake, but anyway, these are just maps showing the distributions and how intense some of these sites are. Okay, now, the potential tick-borne diseases that you're facing in the Piedmont of North Carolina. You've got Lyme disease, you've got Borrelia burgdorferi sensu stricto, you've got Rickettsia basettii, Andersoni, and other species in the burgdorferi group that can cause mild Lyme-like cases in humans. You've got southern tick-associated rash illness, the STARI, and that's caused by Borrelia lone stari. You've got tick relapsing fever, Rickettsia miyamotoi, spotted fevers, or Rickettsia rickettsii, Parkeri, and Amblyommatis, ehrlichiosis, ehrlichiosis. There are cases, quite a few cases showing up now of humans getting the dog ehrlichiosis. So that goes along with Chathamiensis and Ewing eye. Anaplasmosis, we have that. Tick paralysis is now rare. Hadn't seen it probably in a dozen years or so in the state. Tick viruses, Powassan and Heartland viruses, and tularemia. Now, I'd like to point out that there are people now working on tick viruses, and they're discovering more and more viruses in these ticks too. But so far, here in North Carolina, I'll address another one that was more recently found after this. So, okay, this is the last paper that I've got that shows the diversity of pathogens in some of these ticks. Lee et al. In 2014 in Parasites and Vectors, that's the journal it was published in, found 14 confirmed human pathogens in the Lone Star tick that were removed from the skin of outdoor workers in North Carolina, okay? And those outdoor workers were wildlife officers, foresters, and park rangers. They had Anaplasma phagocytillum, they had Ehrlichia chafiensis, Ewing eye, and a new species, another new record for North Carolina, species Panola Mountain. They had Rickettsia amblyommatis, Rickettsia macillii, R. parkeri, R. rickettsii. They had Rickettsia species A, Connorii, a variant of Connorii. Connorii is Mediterranean spotted fever. So we finally got a case here and found the pathogen here in the United States. I tried to get the state lab to check for Connorii 10, 15 years ago and couldn't get it done. So anyway, our species B, Neophelus, this is a worldwide problem now. It's Rickettsia felis and causes serious illness in humans. Rickettsia species C, these are all new species, by the way. Felis, monacensis, and D, near typhi. These are all three new species down there on the bottom there. So those were all found on ticks that were attached off of field workers. We have an arenavirus now that was found in a North Carolina patient called Whitewater Canyon virus. We have a phlebivirus, Heartland virus in deer, and in humans in other states. So this is a very dangerous virus, Heartland. It caused a number of deaths in Missouri and out in the Midwest where it was originally found, and it's apparently spread our way. Here, I'm going to address one more tick, and that's the black-legged tick, and I'm not going to go into DVs and the other ticks. But the human pathogens found by Lee et al. In black-legged ticks were Burgdorferi sensu stricto, Bissettii, Miyamotoi, and Mayoni, which is another Rickettsia, Borrelia that's common up in the upper Midwest that causes human illness. Then we have Rickettsia amblyommatis in the spotted fever group, montanensis, Parkeri, and there are cases of spotted fever montanensis now reported from in Tennessee. Parkeri, species C near monacensis, and an unknown Rickettsia species. And the flavivirus, Powassan virus, also taken from the black-legged ticks. So this is giving you a broad picture now of what we know about all of the pathogens that these ticks can potentially transmit. Whether all of them will give everyone a disease or not depends on your immune system. A lot of people get bit by these and never get sick. So, but anyway. Okay. Next, let me check that. Yeah. Avoiding ticks. I'm not going to talk much about controlling or anything like that, but I do want to talk about avoiding ticks, avoid the activity in tick-infested areas. I think most of you know about that already. You're very familiar with that. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me? Okay. Stay on paths. Stay on paths and avoid brush and tall grass. That means mow your yards. Wear light-colored clothing so you can see the ticks when they get on you. Wear long pants, long-sleeve shirts when you're out. Tuck the pants cuffs into your socks or your boots so that they cannot crawl up the insides of your and get on your legs. They crawl up your pants legs and you can spot them. Tuck your shirt tails into your pants. Don't wear these, okay? Use repellents. And the one that I want to mention here is Permethrin, which is most effective against ticks, but cannot be applied to the skin. And I'll show you a picture of this in a few minutes. You spray your pants and your shoes and your socks the night before, and then you wear them the next day. And it will last about 8 to 10 washes. So you can use this for quite a while. But you'll find out when it's worn out, because you'll get ticks all over you, okay? So it will kill the ticks. They actually are not just repelled, it kills them. Check frequently for ticks on clothing and the skin. Remove attached ticks quickly, ASAP. Some of these organisms takes 36 hours for the pathogen to be transmitted. The tick has to be attached, like Lyme disease. But some of them, like Rocky Mountain spotted fever, can be transmitted in 2 hours. So get them off of yourself as fast as possible. Yes, ma'am. I can't hear you, ma'am.
What's the best way to detach the ticks so they don't regurgitate the
Right, and she raised the point. If you grab a hold of the tick with your finger, you're mashing the tick and you're squirting everything in the tick in your body, okay? So what you've got to do is you've got to get a very fine pointed forceps, jeweler's forceps, very fine, okay? And you can buy them at an entomology supply place called BioQuip.
I mentioned everybody on your table has the tick kits. It actually has tweezers with a little magnifying glass specific
Right.
to this.
Right. Now the tweezers that are in these kits are flat pointed, I think. They're flat, right?
They're very fine pointed.
Are they? Okay, good. Yeah, they're very fine pointed. And that's the main thing that you want to use. You get as close to the skin as you can and you pull straight out slowly. You do not twist it, turn it, or anything, because you'll break the head off, and then you've got a bacterial infection. You'll get a bacterial infection. Yes?
Is there any understanding of how long it takes to transmit alpha-gal?
I'm sorry.
Is there any understanding of how long it takes to transmit alpha-gal? You said the Rocky Mountain spotted fever can transmit in 2 hours. What about alpha-gal? The alpha-gal is
Some people never know because they never did. So most of people did. I suspect, this is supposition on my part, purely hypothetical, okay? I suspect that most of the people getting alpha-gal have never been exposed to Amblyomma americanum before. And they're coming into this area and they're getting it. Like this student I had, he was from Washington State. Yes?
I would say that
I'm sorry.
my experience and friends that I know, my experience and those that
I know we have it in the area, they've lived here for years, and they got it. But yet, and they don't really know why some get it and some don't. And it's not just people who are allergic to lots of things, or people who get it who have zero allergies. They just don't know. But I've lived in North Carolina almost all my life and exposed to these things. Oh, yeah.
We're gonna have to, in deference to the next speaker, we're gonna have to move along and,
Can I just quickly?
yeah.
Okay, let me quickly go through. That known, it comes under different brands, but that's Permethrin, and you can get it at the hunting supply stores and at the tractor supply stores and in most places. My conclusions, the bad news first. Now we have more pathogens to make you sick. Controlling ticks remains difficult. More people moving into Chatham means more humans. Tick exposures, which equals more human cases. Commercial laboratories continue to remain behind the progress curve in identifying vector-borne pathogens. That's a big one. More work is still required to be able to control tick-borne human diseases in North Carolina. Those are my bad news. But I'm very excited about the good news, okay? Dermacentor variabilis numbers have declined dramatically and now uncommon and rare in many areas. There are 2 new state entomologists hired by the health department, state health department, and I think one is here, I'm not sure. Alexis, are you here? Okay, yeah, good. Michael couldn't make it. We feel we have discovered most of the major pathogens in our ticks that are causing problems in diagnosing human cases. Molecular DNA techniques are now available for the state laboratory to use in accurately identifying more tick-borne pathogens and diagnosing human cases. We now have public health entomologists at Appalachian State, Eastern Carolina, North Carolina State, UNCG, and Western Carolina University that may continue research on ticks in the state. And I'm finished.